We will be switching gears to talk about the climate change and adaptations, and of course our preparedness. Climate change is, as simply put, your actions, my actions, that affects the environment. It is apparently what you give the environment that it gives back to you. How are you treating the environment that you live in? Are you treating it cool? Are you treating it good? The environment can harm you if you don't treat it right. Very important. All right, we have with us an environmental expert, Dr. Abonyi. He is live on Zoom this morning. Good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Morning in the studio. Good morning, Nigerians. You're welcome.
How do you do this morning?
I'm
How's
okay.
the weather there?
I'm okay. Yes, we are okay. We are okay here. Thank you. Thank you for the program. Thank you for calling on me.
We've seen some predictions from NIMET over the last few weeks, especially as it concerns this year. How should we be preparing for what the climate would give us this year, 2025?
Yes. Based on the current latest NIMET predictions, they were saying that we expect rains from March, late March, but they counted some states in Nigeria, which include Enugu, part of North Central, and even Bayelsa and Rivers, some more states in the southern part of the country. That those states will have a late rainfall, delayed rainfall. Yeah, that is a good information and a good alert for preparedness. Because to start with, our weather, we have all known that there is a significant change in our weather. I think we need to start to let our listeners be carried along to really know this climate change we are talking about. No, yes, it has been a recurring decimal. We have been speaking about it, but it is still good that we highlight what it is all about, so that maybe those who are listening for the first time will know actually what we are talking about. Yes, if you allow me, I will explain climate change as the situation whereby our temperature, the temperature of our environment, our surrounding temperature and humidity changes significantly and over a long period of time. It has a significant implication in the vegetation and our life as a whole, because the vegetation around us is determined by the temperature, the ambient temperature, and the availability of humidity. When there is no rain and the temperature is high, then plants and vegetables, crops, trees tend to grow less. And that is what now moves to where we start having desertification and reduced vegetation. That is areas that used to be mangrove, that used to be Sahel savanna, will now begin to migrate to deserts and less of plants. And when we have this less of plants everywhere getting dried up, definitely even our crops, what constitute our food and economic plants and trees, begin to reduce. And that tends to start having issues of famine. The other aspect of the consequences of this change in our weather condition, that is the change in temperature and humidity, could be the extreme side of it, where you now have too much of water, too much of rain, too much of causing flooding, where our environment, the surface land will become overflogged. It takes over by water, And that as well have consequences on our lives, because as well our food and water supply will be adversely affected, and it has a lot of consequences on us. And I think that it is on this knowledge that NIMET will always inform, because Nigeria has become part of the belt where the climate change always it impacts on us seriously, because I think every year we do have issues of flooding, and continually Nigeria is now is being affected by this the other end of the effect of climate change, which I described as desertification. So the areas where plants and vegetables and trees grow in Nigeria are reducing. I think if we have time, with all the impacts that are associated with all this, is this migration, the herders now looking for pasture, and because the parts of the north where they used to, which is the natural abode, is continually getting out of this pasture, so they move downwards and follow the pasture, because you need to follow the food. It is where the food exists that you go, and so that you keep feeding your animals and keep getting the economic benefits associated with it. So, and that's why they are moving downwards. And as they move, they impact and interfere with the food growing part of the country, where you now see a lot of issues of farmer and herders clashes. All these issues are associated with the climate change, which is a change in the rainfall and a change in ambient environmental temperature. So I believe that it is on this, how to control the effects associated with it, that my NIMET will always inform us ahead of time. See what you are expecting, see what you are going to get to, so that we start making arrangements, we become prepared. We now have to start making, what is our preparedness measures? What are we taking? What are we putting in place, so that this will not catch us napping and maybe cause more devastating effects? It is I think all these are in line, because with this good information that NIMET has released ahead of time, we will now start getting prepared. I think that is the crux of your question. So I think having given this background, let us now, you can now choose and pick from any area, whether further explanation or what we need to do, the adaptation and preparedness. So I think you can now put your question, so that we'll become more directional in answering it. Thank you.
All right. You can't really talk about climate change without talking about human activities. I mean, how much of that do we even know? Because again, climate doesn't just change. Things happen. There are reasons why climate change. Do you think Nigerians even know that their activities affect climate, and to what extent? And what should we be doing at this time?
Good. That is exactly the point where to start. Because this climate that changes, yes, at times it could be natural, but many a time it is aggravated by our activities, by the activities of men. Yes, like I did say, lack of rain, that rains no longer come, as in you don't have enough rain as it used to be, was as a result of the issues of this climate change. There is a trigger. What triggers climate change is what we talk about, the greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse gases, like we talk about, the carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbon, nitrous oxide. These, when they are emitted into the atmosphere, will eventually lead to this climate change issue we are talking about. And the release of this carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbon, nitrous oxide, is associated with use of what we call natural gases. That is a natural carbon deposit in the ground. Use of use of hydrocarbons, petroleum. That's a what do you call it? This petroleum in the ground, natural, all this natural carbon, the cutting of trees. Fossil fuel is the word I was trying to remember. Use of fossil fuels, which include petroleum, kerosene, green plants that use all these use in cooking and in fueling our industries. So all these actually emit a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. And when this carbon dioxide go into the air, they facilitate this climate change we are talking about. So it is important for us to understand that these trees, because these days, because of high cost of gas, cooking gas and kerosene, people tend to switch and non-availability of electricity, that's power from NEPA or EEDC as the case may be. So because of this lack of other sources of energy, you find out that we now tend to switch to these natural fossil fuels by cutting down trees to make charcoal. And what we do not know that as we do this, we are further depleting the reservoir that absorb this carbon dioxide and replenish the earth with oxygen. When we cut down trees, green trees, these mangrove forests, they actually help us to mop up, because eventually people must exist. There must be relatively companies that use this fossil fuel and release carbon dioxide. But nature made it in such a way that these green trees, these trees that we plant around us and in the forest, they constitute reservoir that mops up this carbon dioxide so that it doesn't get into the air to trigger this climate change. But when our activities are targeted and focused on cutting down these trees without replacement, because that is the important thing, we have to live. If we require to have some trees like timber that we use for our to build our houses, we have to make deliberate efforts to replace them. But these days, we do not even think about replacement. The only thing we do is to go to the forest, make sure we deplete, cut down, use for timber, use for firewood and other activities, our furniture and every other thing, without replacement. There is a high tendency of now the real estate managers and businessmen, their interest is get into any farmland, any land, clear, build estates. And there is no way they try to make sure that they replace all these trees. So the use of these trees, cars burning, industries firing, will consume this fossil fuel and release quantums of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbon. Chlorofluorocarbon comes mostly from our refrigerating system. The refrigerator in your house, in your car, in all the cooling systems, they release this chlorofluorocarbon, continuously emitting into the environment without any measure of taking it out. These actually aggravate the issues of climate change. I am concentrating on these factors because that is what is obtainable in our climate here. Abroad, they are really very much industrialized, and a lot of these greenhouse effects gases are being emitted in a large number. That's even the European Union and has all these international health agencies have been talking about giving mandates, giving deadline, giving emission standards, but more often than not, all these are exceeded without actually a reasonable consequences for that. And that is why we have climate change in our hands, and all the resultant effects, we are living with them. So we encourage that while you try to pursue your economic needs, make sure that as you are cutting trees, you are replacing them one way or the other. So as you build your house, don't always cut all the trees around you, so that these trees actually help to sustain life and mitigate the issues of climate change.
All right. I mean, there's a whole lot to talk about when it comes to climate change.
Yes.
How do you think technology can be leveraged, in helping communities adapt to climate change? Put that side by side with the fact that we have a new leader who really doesn't believe in anything called climate change. I'm talking about the president of the United States, Donald Trump. I mean, do you think his emergence as the president of the United States, at least for the next 4 years, would, deplete some of the advantages or successes that have been recorded around the world as regards the agreements across boards that has been reached in different fora? He planning to even dissociate the United States from those agreements. Do you think that we would have a setback regarding that? And of course, putting side by side with how technology can be used in checking climate change and how societies can leverage technology in adapting to climate change.
Okay, thank you. Your question is very apt. I think I will answer it in two folds. I'll first of all start on how technologies can be leveraged in climate change adaptation and remediation. Yes, technology is actually helping, because as a matter of fact, it is the deployment of technology that NIMET was able to predict and to some good extent successfully what the rain pattern will be this year. And when you now, with that kind of technology to predict what will happen, you begin now to prepare. When the rains will be high, you begin to prepare because when the rains are high, you expect flooding. So the issues of how to mitigate, how to control the infrastructural facilities you need to put in place in terms of channels from where the water will drain, the backups you needed, so that, and even where you cannot afford to stop it from coming, you direct that people will have to shift to upper land so that the effect will be minimal. Because once rain drops, it will have to move. It will follow a channel. If you don't provide a channel for it, an adequate channel, that is what results to flooding and colossal damage. But with the information, assuming we'll put the information into actions, we'll eventually reduce it. So again, technology has come because part of the issues of the consequences of climate change impact can be mitigated by, for instance, farmland is mostly what suffers during flooding. And when these farmlands are destroyed, definitely they will culminate into a shortage of food and famine. Then it will eventually destabilize many economic indices. So technology can help in mitigating these issues, because we can now actually grow plants away from the natural abode. For instance, there are issues. It's a growing trend now that people can plant in baths that are stored in their compound. So it is actually growing. It is actually trending now that you can actually use collect sand and put in your compound to grow yam, can grow maize and some other economic tree. Yes, it is true that it may not be in large quantity, but at least it can be in a substantial uh, uh, portion that can at least minimize what you buy in the market. If many individuals adopt that mechanism, then it means that though it is substancy, but when it reduces what you go to the market to demand, it can it's actually have helped in mitigating the impact of the climate change. So this is technology. Technology is not always about machineries. So once any mechanism that you improve, so that you don't actually rely on what nature throws at you. That is a method of technology. So there are several ways which technology can actually help in mitigating the impact of climate change. Then, when you talk about the issue of Donald Trump, the new leader of United States, actually, that is a cause for concern because when we look at the position and the role of United States in the global economy and global politics, you understand that it will actually impact on the world. It's unfortunate that Trump tend not to believe in climate change. I don't know how to put it. Maybe it is just part of what somebody can just decide to. He's entitled to his opinion, but what I know is that climate change and its effect is no longer a thing somebody is wondering whether it exists or whether it doesn't exist. It is clear and it is before everybody. But one he can decide to choose and say, I don't believe, even when you are clearly seeing it. So the issue is here is that if he do not want to abide by all those regulations the world bodies have put in place, that is exactly what I said in the past, that these regulations and stipulations, people tend to not strictly abide by them without the consequences. So I think the world should try, the world leaders should try to checkmate Trump, because he cannot just say I don't believe. It is not just a matter of I don't believe. This is science and it is practical and it is real. So if he decides not to abide by these emission standards, then he's putting the whole world into jeopardy, because the influence of America is not a simple effect in the world economy. So I feel that the other world leaders should try to put him in check, because I know if he decides not to abide by all these emission standards, definitely it will impact in further deteriorating the effect of climate change the world is suffering. And like I said, this great industrialization actually happened in those developed countries. We are only here, the third world countries, especially Nigeria, we are only at the receiving end, because I don't, if you have to measure and equate the quantum of gases we emit from here, you see that it is highly insignificant compared to what they are emitting here. But the world is a village, because the atmosphere uh, 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 covers all of us. Whatever is emitted, and these are gases. Whatever is emitted anywhere in the world, once it gets into the atmosphere, it circulates around the globe. So the effect we too have are living with it. So we cannot just accept to sit back and say, okay, you don't believe in it. Okay, go ahead. No, that should not be how. After all, it now defeat the intent and purpose of forming the World Alliance, because the intent is to protect the world as a whole. So when one is not acting out of that agreement, I think there should be a mechanism of bringing him to check. That's what I think.
All right. How prepared do you think Nigeria is when it comes to things related to adapting to some disasters like flood or even droughts? I mean, the other time we saw a flood from Borno State, and it was really difficult containing it. We saw a lot of people who had lost their lives, lost their properties. I mean, it looked like a very helpless situation at the time. At the time, in fact, there was a dam that's, overrun its shores. But, we've also seen other floods that have, come unannounced, and took us unawares. I'm just wondering, do you think that we have all it takes to mitigate against these issues, floods, droughts, national disasters? Do we have it? And what should we be doing in order to get it if we don't?
Thank you. I think by now, Nigeria haven't been receiving blows of issues of climate change. Even if they used to be adamant, I think by now it should be clearer and getting clear and to them. And I think Nigeria is getting prepared. I continue to say yes, kudos to NIMET for releasing those predictions, because it is a step in guiding further preparedness measures. Yes, like we all, the memories of the devastation has not getting out of our minds. What happened, the Ladoja Dam that broke down, and the consequences in Bruno and down south of Nigeria, and all that has happened since 2012. Yes, those were our sore moments. And I'm sure, I believe that the federal government and the associated agencies are on top of the situation, making preparedness, making preparations, giving information, and advising the masses. I think where I will say we'll focus more attention is in, because it is said that you talk, but when the person you are talking to, how is he taking the information, and how is he responding to it? I think the masses is what we too, we need to be encouraging to take the advice that is coming from government agencies. If we say we are leaving everything to government, I don't think they may be able to have the capacity to tackle everything. We too needs. That's why I'm harping on sensitizing and encouraging the masses to begin to take actions, because eventually this impact rests on us, the masses, the individuals. Government is just a name. No person, no particular individual is a government. So government is just an umbrella body that controls and guides us. And when they give this information, we need to take them and run. To run as in put it in practice and follow through. When they now say that this is what the volume of rainfall we are expecting, this is what is likely to happen. People should not do this. People should not do that. We should try to abide by it. In terms of, because flooding, I still suppose and look forward that it will still happen. It will still happen because the rains may still be as high as it used to be, because the climate change is here. So these effects we're expecting. So those who are, what I think again, yeah, government has to be doing something. Yet we will still be encouraging individuals to do their own role, because there are certain infrastructure that has to be in place that you don't expect individuals to be the people responsible, in terms of having drainage system. How have we, it is not just about letting us know that the rains will be high. The rains will be high. When they come, they will drain. What are the infrastructure that has been put in place to ensure that when the rain comes, it follows through these channels? If we count in the past, when the Cameroonians warned that their dam is over getting out of the carrying capacity. What did we do? We like virtually sat back to see how it will come, and it came and it devastated us. So this time around, while the government is letting us know to do the little the individual can do, government as well have to be giving these channels, increasing the bank when there could be embankments on the walls of rivers that we know that are prone to this flooding, so that when the high volume of water comes, it do not need to flood into the community. It follows through the channels. And in the cities, in the towns, we have adequate drainage system deep enough that will carry the expected volume, because when we know the volume of rain that is coming, we can actually predict the quantum of flood that will associated with it. We'll make drainage, especially as we build roads, we make drainage that is equivalent to the expected volume of runoff that will go through it. When we make shallow drains, it is as good as nothing, because within a twinkle of an eye, for any slightest rain, it will overflow, and that will be the. So with this should be a conscious effort, knowing full well that we are in this belt, and we are always facing this flooded, so that when we build our roads, we'll make sure that we have enough drains, because all this will be channeled into the drainage into the seas and move down to the Atlantic Ocean that drains the country. So all these are intertwined. The government has to play their role. The community, us, the individuals, have to play our own role, so that at the end of the day, even when these effects come, the impact on us will be minimal.
Do you think we have driven this information about climate change to the rural communities? Because every now and then, even in the urban centers, you rarely hear hear people speak of it or even discuss it, nudging them to take care of our environment, because it is from taking care of the environment that the climate becomes better. Do you think this information has been cascaded properly to the rural areas? And how so do you think we should embark on education of people in the rural areas, especially where those places where our agricultural produce come from?
Yeah, my brother, I actually see the import of this your question. I do not really think that this information has internalized in the communities. Even though one can say that we pass the information, anybody who hears the news on radio and television must have heard the information, but I think people just hear the information and walk away. This information has not, in one way or the other, completely internalized. Because when international information is internalized, it means that people are now conscious and they are taking actions with regards to that climate change issues. So what I will, Nigeria is a place where we will just talk and walk away. It has become a seasonal thing that just maybe, yes, I think when it is coming to rainy season, when rainy season is approaching, we'll just make that statement and we'll walk away. And when flood come, we'll shout and we'll walk away. So the way to go about is to make sure that we are not always caught panting or pants down, is to, I don't know, if one begin to talk about another agency or a body that should be carrying out this information, this preaching consistently, and possibly levels of enforcement, we will now begin, one may be accused of trying to say too many agencies, But let me even come from this perspective. I am an environmental health officer. And I know as well, I train environmental health officers in school, in the university where I work. This aspect of task can be given to environmental health officers. Environmental health officers are employed in every local government in Nigeria. They are employed in every state of the country. So they can actually pick up this responsibility if monitored, and as in let it become that this becomes their one of, because they have a lot of other responsibility, but let this becomes one of the responsibility as an emerging trend, because this issue of climate change was not there 30 years, 40 years back. We used to hear about it, but now it is with us. It is now so it is now a matter that the policymakers can now say, yes, take up this, because environmental health officers go house to house, institution to institution, preaching about other environmental issues. So this climate change can be placed at the forefront, so that, from like we've said in other fora, when people begin to take actions, not just when the rain comes, but even before the rain comes, from little things like cleaning your environment, making sure you don't block gutters, disposing the waste appropriately, not in channels that even the few channels that government build, people will use their waste to go and block all of them. When you are blocking the water channel, you are actually trying to make the impact of the climate change more devastating on the people. So when this role now is given to environmental health officers employed all over the states, the local government, I think it will penetrate, the information will penetrate, because at every point in time, these people are in the community preaching one aspect of environmental issue to the other. So this one can as well be placed in part of their role to actually penetrate this news, this information, this enlightenment, so that it gets internalized in the people. The people take this as part of their routine activities. We are acting for climate change. By this, people now begin to make conscious efforts to plant trees around their houses. So, and these are part of what the necessary things that should be done. It should be done. So I recommend that these environmental health officers are given this role. If the environmental health officers are not enough to carry out this responsibility in the states, local government, because the whole of this Nigeria has a local government, employ environmental health officers if they are not enough to actually internalize this information, because actually it needs to be internalized. It doesn't have just to be an annual thing when you just come and you shout it and walk away. You shout it and walk away. It's as if anytime we are talking about it, it's as if you are talking it anew. So when there are people, there are institutions that are responsible for internalizing this information, and actually there has to be some level of enforcement. People have to take responsibility for what they do wrong that will impact on the environment and aggravate the issues of climate change. So I seriously recommend that environmental health officers should be given this responsibility and monitored to see how it goes, so that at the end of every year, there will be assessments. How far? What is the impact? What have you been able to do? One can actually take a survey of the whole community and say, what do you know about climate change? What have you done to minimize the impact of climate change? And from this, we will now know whether it is working or not working.
All right. Dr. Isaiah Abonyi, many thanks for your time and your input on the show this morning. We truly, really appreciate you. We hope that these steps are taking, just like you have recommended, in making sure that we save our climate. I mean, if we don't have climate, I wonder what we'll have, really. Thank you once again for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.